All right, why don't we get going here? We're having a little issue getting things up and running. We'll blame Andy for that since it is Microsoft-based.
Apologize in advance.
And I know that he's got broad shoulders that he's going to take that. So I'd like to welcome everybody out to our session today called Video Anytime, Anywhere, Video Cross Platforms, TV, Internet, and Mobile.
Woo!
A mouthful.
Yeah.
So what I will do is let's jump right into this fairly quickly here. I don't want to spend a lot of time on introductions. I will tell you the panelists are extremely talented and have their resumes are extremely deep and broad. I know you're going to get a lot out of their insight, but they are their bios are in the packet that you can get to it. So just real quick, we have here to my left we have Jay Samet. Then to his left looks like we've got Eric Opeka from Cinedigm. We then have Tom Burns from EMC Isilon. We also have Jason Henderson from Dish Network, and last but not least, we've got Andy Beach from Microsoft. Before we jump into this, I'm always amazed at the kind of the broad section that we have of experience, and just to get a flavor for the room. By show of hands, how many people get their paid television through a satellite provider? Show of hands.
Wow.
Okay. How many through a cable provider? Okay. How many have cut the cord? Okay. Interesting.
I have seen more hands than people.
So it's always interesting to see that, isn't it? So streaming services. How many do have a Netflix subscription? Okay. Hulu? Amazon? Yeah, I like all three of them, right? Absolutely. How about devices to get some of those things? Roku boxes? Okay, Apple TV? How about just a smart TV or DVR? How about a gaming console? Xbox? Let's be a little more specific. All right, you got some fans out there.
There we go.
My people.
So, thank you very much for that. It's good to see.
Does anybody, I'm curious, does anybody watch anything on OTA right now? OTA, okay. So like 2, interesting.
I do.
And 3.
Rabbit ears.
Better picture.
It can be, yeah.
Better picture than satellite.
Yeah.
Ooh.
When it comes in clear.
It all depends.
Yeah, it's better.
Yeah, when it comes in clear, it's better.
I'm with you.
$1 antenna.
No, you're totally right. You're totally right about the cost.
So, given that we have a little bit of a spectrum here, let me lay just a touch of foundation before we jump into this and we get them talking and getting me out of the way. Deloitte does some survey work. I just wanted to give some of the responses to some of that stuff here. Let me page down here. So what this is the way to read this is there's a question down at the bottom. It says, of the services that you indicated that your household purchases, which do you value the most? So this is a value statement, not which do you have the most, but which do you value the most? And of the answers that are in the top 3, home internet is by far number 1. Surprising anybody? I think my bet is no. Number 2, paid television. Paid television subscription coming in number 2, and number 3 is streaming subscription. We have certain that have actually subscribed to all 3 that I threw out there, and so not surprising either. But you can also see that, even across some of the generations, not such a big deal and not a whole lot of discrepancies there. In terms of device and watching content, our millennials are watching almost 50% of their content not on a traditional television. Surprise anybody here? Okay, Jay, we'll let you.
The second screen is the first screen, folks. First screen when you wake up.
I think it has to do with whether the rents are in the media room or not. I believe that millennial thing is only as soon as the parents come home, they will get out of the media room and they will watch the exact same show on a laptop up on their bedroom.
So they don't have to be with their parents or
Basically,
anybody else.
yes. Yep.
Having teenagers, I can attest to that.
Anecdotal evidence only, but I believe it to be true.
Okay, so that's an interesting fact data point there. And when it comes to the streaming services, this kind of gets you why they're looking at those streaming services. Jay, I'm in your way, I'm sorry. You can get the typical stuff, how, where, and what you want, but the things I'll point out to, just in terms of a change, can everybody hear me? I don't need to be I got a loud enough voice, that carries. One of the things I'll point to down here is just some of the extensive libraries and some of the recent releases. You see the numbers from 14 to 15 and how much they jumped. You've got this huge shift, and that's really being a driver for why people are going to some of those services. And then the last one I'll show here is looking at, well, let me just get over here so I can read it. Once again, this is in terms of a paid television. What's your preference in doing the following? You know, subscribing only to channels I want to watch regularly, that's about 49%. Subscribe to a package of channels even if I don't regularly watch them all, 49%, then 39%, and then only purchase those shows that I want to do, 12%. So seeing the skinny bundles out there and the things like that we're seeing is not surprising by any stretch of the imagination. And then the average number of channels, how many do you think it is? Obviously, does that surprise you? It's 11. On average, we watch 11 channels as a whole. Probably not surprising to any of you. So with that said, Jay, let me just throw it out to you. You know, we've talked a lot about streaming. What jumps out to you in the streaming world right now?
The set-top box is dead. So it's Bruce Willis. It's still out there. It's in a lot of homes, but it won't be around for, doesn't know it's dead for how many years. Your smart TVs can do it directly. And so the key thing about that and what you saw in the survey is we now have a multitude of sources that will be coming into whichever device we choose, finding what's available, when, from whom, even if you legally have all of those available, even if you're paying for all of it, there's no one that has solved that problem. And that is being solved mostly by social today, by an informal process among our peers, which is proving more and more effective. But, you know, and we can get into this later, but AI is probably the single biggest place to make investment if you're a major media distribution company today, because that's your best chance of monetizing that which is not live.
Tom? Streaming. What jumps out?
I totally agree that the set-top box in its present form is dead, but like so many other physical bits of infrastructure that we have tended to own in the past, it's just becoming virtualized. A cloud DVR is now a much more economical way for a cable or telco to sell you that essential service.
Agreed.
Do you want me to respond to that?
Please.
So we actually have tens of millions of set-top boxes in the universe, and I mean, I think the question is becoming, you know, first, what is a set-top box? Because you're right, it can change. A smart TV can start to take on some of that functionality. But the fact is, most of the things that we're buying arguably are a set-top box. A Roku is a set-top box. An Apple TV ultimately is a set-top box.
But Chromecast is $25, not a $435 dinosaur. Which I can freely say now that I don't have to deal with them. Now that I'm not programming.
I mean, the problem is, so I'm not saying eventually all of that could become virtualized, but right now a set-top box is a really efficient way of getting you a lot of content in one place. For instance, what are we going to, like, the difficulty is in deciding, you know, LG has one way of doing it, Samsung has another way of doing it. So if we put all of our faith in smart TVs, we have to eventually figure out how to make all of those be exactly the same.
Maybe not all the same. I mean, a good user interface will win out. I dislike the user interface on smart TVs almost as much as I dislike the user interface on set-top boxes.
Well, everybody's trying to make a closed garden, which
But we're back to the
if you
old
look
walled
at if you
garden
look
days.
at the internet, there's 50 bazillion sources of web pages, content, etc.
Right.
And we've figured out how to navigate to that.
Yeah.
But it's still a pull, not a push. And first person that can solve a push. And YouTube does it really well because
Right.
we all go down the rabbit hole of Prince died, I'm going to watch one Prince video.
Yeah.
4 hours and 25 minutes later,
Yeah.
They have fed us up, our lifetime of memories very efficiently.
But I feel really good right now, for instance, about the UI innovations that we're doing on the Hopper, which is the set-top box platform that Dish has. We're working really hard to personalize that and bring in streaming services, and Netflix we integrated so that it has an integrated search. So if you
Well, that's what I
you
said
know,
back to the one interface, and you
Right.
could put in, if Jeff would allow you, put in Amazon's content, and so we have rights and lawyers in the way. It's so nice to be free. I was a vendor to everybody on this panel, and I stepped down as public CEO, so I can be honest today. So you have like a 1-week window,
As opposed to being,
as opposed to being a public CEO where you're not allowed to say anything.
He gets one bestseller and suddenly he's like, I'm quitting.
Yeah, but that's the real challenge. Is we're trying to pretend and extend today's business terms because we're so afraid of losing monetization that it is different empires and rights holders that are preventing the perfect interface, or you have to pay an exorbitant TiVo, Rovi shakedown.
But isn't that the way that always new technology is introduced? I mean,
Not just technology. The 800-pound gorilla wants to be an 800-pound gorilla.
But we always interpret the new technology in terms of the old. We're used to a certain way of interacting with a hard disk, and therefore we make that same interaction decision when we're interacting with a streaming service. It's the reason why the engine is in the front of the car, because that's where the horse was,
But I feel like that has flipped, though, what you're talking about. I think the perception used to be if you had a service and it was online, everybody complained when it didn't work the way your set-top box did it, fast switching, other things, the quality of the video. All those conversations have gone away, and now the set-top box doesn't behave like Web or Hulu or Netflix, and now that's where the set-top box
And the biggest
is in
reason
trouble.
for that is it's a different consumer.
Totally.
That your parents paid a cable bill. Okay, we now have 2 generations that have been used to getting all their content for free. Okay, 2 interesting facts. I spent 10 years running music companies when that's all that fit through the pipe before broadband. 2 interesting facts this past week. Number 1, for the first time in history, the sale of music, old catalog, outsold new releases.
Great.
So no one's buying anything new, and the only reason old stuff is old people, like when their favorite acts die, they remember, oh yeah, now I'll buy their music. I won't buy it when they're alive, I'll steal it. And then the second is to be the #1 bestseller in the US, something that Led Zeppelin never made it to #1 on the charts. You only have to sell 16,000 digital records to be #1. So if we do not solve the monetization of this problem, it just becomes what was in your survey, who's providing us broadband, and we're happy to pay for that. That's the new crack.
But what was that, just so I remember, what was that percentage you said of the number of people who get pay TV currently? Because this is a bleeding edge audience.
yeah, no, it wasn't what get the.
It's what do they value the most.
The question is what they value
Oh,
the
okay.
most. I have all the data, I just didn't bring it with me.
No,
because
I'm
I
not
didn't
trying to
wanna-
quiz you, I apologize.
No, but so it's about value and where do they value, and pay
Right.
TV came in number 2.
If you could get live sports without pay TV, how many people would cut the cord?
Interesting.
Oh, different.
Yeah, and Jay, it's fascinating, when
Different
I've done that presentation and looked at that data, when talking to the audiences, for years and years, there were 2 things that stopped people from cutting the cord. Number 1 was sports.
Sports.
Number 2, at the time, was getting HBO. That was clearly a number 2. It was a distant number 2, and obviously that's been solved.
And ESPN's going OTT.
Exactly, yeah. How interesting is it that both HBO and ESPN have had financial issues and are now frantically trying new business models where they thought they were unassailable?
And
That's
for those that don't follow inside sports, pun intended, ESPN was so powerful that they got a huge dollar amount out of everybody. And a couple years ago, they tried to rape and pillage a higher number, and they made it no longer mandatory in the bundle. And enough people like me who don't watch sports dropped it that Disney has an obligation of somewhere between 20 and 30 billion dollars in the next few years, and the decline of cable won't fill that. So ESPN to survive and Disney to survive has to go OTT. So the model changes very quickly.
Change is not in
And
a great way.
the skinny bundle could be the perfect solution.
It could be, but one of the weird things I find, I mean, for one thing, people don't necessarily understand how bundles work, like why Disney has anything to do with ESPN or why MTV has anything to do with Nickelodeon. So they get frustrated with, like, I didn't want Nickelodeon, I just wanted Showtime or whatever. And but these things come, these things are neighbors of one another. But what I find fascinating is that we always these markets tend to keep reinventing the same solutions we had before. I mean, eventually, we're going to whittle things down where I can get this video service, this video service, this video service. The dollar value I'm spending when I'm subscribing, and I personally subscribe also to Amazon and Hulu and Netflix, and eventually I'm going to build up a bill that's just as high as the one I was complaining about before, and then I'm going to go, gosh, I wish there was somebody to aggregate all of this, and then we'll reinvent aggregators.
Ask the question to the audience that you were asking us earlier about what do you do when you can't find stuff.
Oh, I'm curious. Actually, yeah. If there's a movie that you think of, hey guys, let's get together and watch this movie we saw in college or whatever, and I don't know, Witchboard from the '80s. I don't know why I picked that movie, but there it is. So because it's a fine film.
Okay then.
So, what sources do you go to figure out where you can find the movie?
Torrent. There you
So
go.
that was my answer too. Is piracy is the solution to essentially a customer service problem.
You wouldn't like check your Netflix or whatever first. You just go straight to the torrent.
Where to watch?
What's that? Where to watch.com.
So, third-party Netflix curated editorial what to watch, as opposed to a recommendation engine or a friend with taste or whatever.
Or
Does anybody
AI.
use an API scraper like
Yeah.
Just Watch? I'm sorry, Jay, I interrupted you.
No, I was just saying AI, back to what I'm harping on right now, that will solve most of this for everybody, including AI can be immoral. So the best copy of
Right.
this to steal is from such and such.
Yeah.
The most success of people that have gone searching downloaded from this torrent.
Tell you what, Eric, obviously you're coming from the Cinedigm world, some over-the-top channels. We always think about Cinedigm being kind of the digital projector and cinema people, but obviously you guys have been adding a whole lot of channels. Where do you see things going from just a streaming perspective? And I mean, you clearly have
Sure. There's been a couple trends that we've seen. So for those of you who don't know what Cinedigm is a digital technology company. I run the division that builds sort of niche vertical OTT services. So we basically focus on, I run 3 different channels that are catering to 3 different interests. One is a sort of a factual documentary channel. Another is one targeting the fandom audience. Think geeks and gamers. And then the third one is a channel we run called the Dove Channel, which is ostensibly, think of it as almost like a faith-based ABC Family. And one of the trends that we found as we've launched these is really twofold. One, the notion that these vertical services are for a lot of families. Look, our audience, when we survey them, 80% of them already subscribe to Netflix. About 40% have Prime, and 10 to 15% have some other service. So for for much of our audience, this is a sidecar. In other words, it's an embellishment of an existing subscription. And what that's telling us is, and what our audience is telling us is, they're not. If these audiences that we're targeting and their other audience buckets, they have very strong interests in a specific vertical that's just clearly not being met by the big players right now. So, Netflix, as you've probably seen, has dropped their, the size of their catalog by 35 to 40% over the last 3 years. And, they're not dropping things from their studio output deals. They're not dropping content. They're expanding originals. What they're dropping are special interest and unique content that you can't find other places. So people
That
are
they
out
don't
there
own.
that they don't own.
That they don't own.
They don't own.
That's a big difference.
So what's happening is users are responding very well when we target them through marketing. And are very, I kind of make a parallel to the magazine world where I'm a big, I'll subscribe to the New Yorker, and then they'll pile up, and then I'll unsubscribe, and then I'll resubscribe. But I think the point is a lot of people are subscribing to these niche OTT services to fill a niche that's just not being scratched by the other services. And within that bucket, we're also seeing a demographic shift. The Dove Channel, when we set out and launched it, we were targeting, sort of families in the mid Gen X, late millennial, slightly older. And what we found is our audience has been very heavy 45 plus, and in a lot of cases, we're seeing a lot of users 60 plus, and it poses specific challenges for customer service and things like that. We get a lot of, people don't understand that you need a Roku to subscribe or to use a service or whatnot. But it is shifting older, and I think as more of that audience comes on board, they're just not being serviced. Netflix can't serve everyone. They can't afford to buy content that will give them a broad enough base. So I think that's a couple of things we've learned.
One other thought that came up when you were talking about the niche play. Anybody see Jungle Book at a theater? The shocking part, and this ties into OTT, is it begins with Jon Favreau thanking you for going to the theater, because 85% of Americans do not set foot in the movie theater anymore. Wow. Okay? And now Sean Parker's going to take that last 10, 12% that do, and for $50, he wants day and date release, because we have better screens in our homes than in many places, and the cost of babysitters and all of that. And if that changes, then that becomes a new window of OTT that the out-of-home experience will then have to be reinvented again.
One quick point on the war between the cinema and used to be television, now it's home theater or media room. Immersive audio is something that comes in with the whole 4K business. 4K is just a stalking horse for high dynamic range, wide color gamut, and immersive audio. Ang Lee says that high frame rate is really cool. I haven't seen enough of it to be sure. But immersive audio is a really good reason to sit in a theater with a bunch of people, and it can't yet be duplicated in a home theater.
5171 if you're over 50 sounds about the same.
22.2. Oh yeah, maybe you're right, but for the target market movie-going audience, 22.2 is fabulous. And in fact, some of the VR panels have been talking about directing the viewer's attention through immersive audio as well. So I think that's a really cool area of exploration, sound direction.
So are you envisioning a world where the only time that people are going to go to the theater is going to be our teenagers because they want the social experience?
Events. Civil War, I'm still going to go see it in a theater. I mean, even if I had the best home theater.
Tent poles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Tentpoles.
Somebody was remarking just this week on a Slate podcast, because I'm way into podcasting. Slate podcast, they were talking about, how prestige dramas, small, right now there's one with Rose Byrne and Susan Sarandon, right? Small, two-hander, and it's just a prestige drama. Those things used to swamp Sundance. And now, if you're going out for prestige drama, TV is the place to be. And
Cable
that's-
TV
Cable
specifically,
TV, and
not
that's,
broadcast.
that's where you see those, right. The Night Manager.
Yeah.
And so what that leaves for these giant screens, which are getting better and better, and they're giving me a recliner to sit in now, is these enormous event films, and the tiny dramas are kind of,
That's
unless
all.
you live in New
That's
York.
all that's being greenlit.
Yeah.
The romantic comedies disappeared. The small
Disappeared
comedy.
from cinema.
Yeah.
But they're on cable.
Yeah.
Andy, when we're talking about OTT, and whenever people think about OTT and Microsoft, they often think of Xbox. Can you give us a kind of a perspective of what you're seeing on the OTT side there?
Sure. We're still in a transition period with Microsoft. We just announced, less than 60 days ago, if I count up my days, that the Universal Windows platform, which has actually been talked about now for 2 years, is finally going to be available on Xbox starting this summer. So the implications there are, if you want to be on Xbox, it used to be something that was invite only. You had to work very closely with us. Now it's going to be something that is much more automated. If you want something and it's on Xbox, it's a very low threshold to enter. You can put it there, and the exact same application also runs on a Windows Phone. It runs on a Windows desktop. It runs on a Surface tablet, and eventually it'll run on a HoloLens as well when that marketplace becomes available. That's sort of the next one in the line after the Xbox. And so it's that ease of development is sort of the next step of the story for the Xbox, where it used to be much more burdensome and it was a very unique process, and it was a much more expensive process. Having worked with those developers, the price for those applications were six-figure applications. That number comes down dramatically when you're looking at something that gets deployed onto a much wider range of devices.
I think that makes a good point, and one thing that, is, as a company that we're trying to be ubiquitous on whatever device somebody wants to be on, one of the big challenges has been, just given the breadth of connected TVs and different platforms, it's kind of like developing a mobile phone application before the iPhone came out, where you do 250 to 300 permutations of the same app to be able to hit enough devices. And in this day and age, I think what we're starting to see is, with Roku going from hardware as the TV is going powerful to being software, being integrated, and I think you're going to see more of that come along. I think the connected TV ecosystem will probably, as these players find it harder and harder to keep these walled gardens going, if the cost to entry to develop apps, without apps and without new apps and without great apps, these ecosystems just aren't going to survive. But I think they're going to either, in the connected TV space, either bank on Roku or the Google ecosystem, and what you'll see is, I think, the development there will flourish. But it's very cost prohibitive for niche, at least for us, for niche channels to deploy and hit every platform that comes to bear, just simply because of these guys. I think that's what, Xbox was cost prohibitive for only the top 10% of all applications. I think with the new framework, same goes for Apple TV with the new device. I think it's far simpler and more cost effective to hit Apple TV than it was, even 4 years ago. So.
And to give Microsoft a plug where you left out in your continued universe to the future is automotive. When we're no longer driving for 4 hours a day, but we're in our portable entertainment thing, a gaming, interactive, immersive, VR, whatever experience will consume a ton of content and a ton of advertising. So that becomes a great place for Hollywood to see new revenue streams.
I'd like to ask a specific question. The best thing that I have experienced with Xbox is that back end that allows in-game purchases, weapons, armor, stuff like that. Do you see any developers working on in video or in entertainment service purchases? Are we finally going to be at that thing that they said 15 years ago? Remember when it was convergence? Remember when it was telco?
Yeah.
Video dial tone? It was always Jennifer Aniston's sweater. Was always the example.
Jennifer Aniston's
right?
sweater.
That was the example, right? Are we? Because you guys have the back end to really seamlessly fulfill what we think of as in-game purchases, but could be in-app or in streaming or in content purchases.
Yeah, there have actually already been some people developing and experimenting in this space, and I wish I could recall the name.
Is it a second screen kind of thing, or is it a video game type of actually as part of the content?
So these were actually part of the gaming side of the content on Xbox, the ability to do things like buy a physical good and then have a virtual version of it that your in-game character or your avatar in the Xbox was also wearing. So there were the one particular place that I'm thinking of, they did t-shirts, they were all gaming related t-shirts. They sold these t-shirts, and when you bought it, if you had already tied your gamer tag to their store, it automatically put the shirt on your character in the Xbox. So you were part and parcel. And they were fairly successful with that. It was a great little experiment for them. It was sort of just an area they dived into, and are continuing to sort of look at how they sort of further that experience into more traditional media space. But in terms of the back-end infrastructure of it, everything that is already enabled with the store today is enabled for media applications as well, meaning I can do one-time purchase. I can do purchases that die after a set amount of time. I can make something completely free. I can make it advertising. The one area that is still will launch, I believe, in time with the Xbox, is the ability to do the monthly subscription with media content as well. So being able to do my Netflix subscription or something else through the Xbox service, so it's all done through one payment system.
There have been deployments of this already in some ways on traditional video. So you're watching a new show, and I know Verizon did this, where you basically it was contextually following what was going on in the show and would show contextually important products. The difficulties are exactly what you would imagine: getting people to be aware that that's a functionality allowing them to turn it off and turn it on. If it's going to be on screen, figuring out the right UI.
Yeah.
And as Jay said, it needs to be super smart so that it's not annoying you and is showing you, not just contextually relevant to the screen, but to you.
Well, I think
yeah.
where you're going to see it beyond physical or virtual is if you look at the whole FanDuel will become legal. So buying fantasy sports, betting on fantasy sports,
Yeah.
the NFL moving a team to Vegas and $1 billion stadium shows that gaming and gambling on sports is now de facto approved. We're not the 1950s anymore. And so that's yet another form of immersive OTT content, another live, and live seems to be the place where most revenues are made today.
What I heard earlier was talk about in-app purchases, and what I want to do is just kind of parlay on that just in terms of revenue models. We seem to swing the pendulum all the time from an advertising model to a subscription model to something else. Are we living in a world where all those models are effective? Is it something different? Is it we are just gradually moving to purely subscription? What are you seeing? And I'll just open that up to all five of you.
I'll start. As we laid out the strategy for our channels, I prefer the freemium approach, where you get access to a subset of the content catalog for free, and then through deep analytics we determine and slice the user base into those based off of behavior, consumption, what have you, those most likely to purchase. We basically model them and say, this user looks a lot like somebody, their consumption patterns look a lot like somebody who's already subscribed, therefore let's have that user, let's create an offer they can't refuse and bring them into the subscription side of it. It's working very well for us. I think we make enough off of the advertising for it to cover the cost of operating a pretty large-scale free service. I think one of the things is, in an advertising model, without pretty massive scale, it's very difficult to monetize. So, subscription, in essence, as we look at subscriber acquisition costs, the freemium model drives it down pretty substantially, and on top of that, we have the benefit of building a pretty massive audience base that over time, as we improve the product, we can convert over. So I like freemium personally.
I think certainly your focus on analytics is probably the interesting bridge between ad-supported and subscriber-supported. And if you combine that with what you were talking about, I wouldn't necessarily call it AI, but certainly the analytics that come from the fraud side of the house and things like that are being now used to apply to media in terms of, there's a company, I just met them at NAB, and they do machine learning, deep neural networks that can recognize and tag video in real time. So that gives you a source of metadata much, much higher quality than paying interns to tag video programs after the fact. And so you can, once you have good quality metadata, then you can do all kinds of things in an advertising or post-advertising kind of world.
Completely agree with you. In fact, one of the big challenges of a niche service. Now, clearly, we don't have a catalog the size of Netflix. So, for example, the challenge of, if we've all laughed as Netflix recommendations, even with, a very large engineering team working on them, they're not always 100%, right? That challenge becomes amplified as you shrink down to a catalog size that is a quarter that size. So one of the things that and Netflix has a team of people that basically have worked full time and put 300 to 500 element points on any given piece of content to make that engine work. We don't have those resources, so one of the things we have sort of focused on is contextualizing recommendations. In other words, if I'm on the Long Island Railroad on a Thursday morning at 7:30 a.m., the recommendation engine, even though I may have just watched a bunch of horror movies last night, I probably shouldn't recommend a feature-length horror movie while you're on the train. Instead, I should probably feature, because of the day part time, short form, and I should probably feature something newsy or lighter, right? So I think the point is there's a context to what device you're on, what time of day it is, where you are, your geolocation. Tie that in with demographics and your viewing history. To me, is how at least we're able to overcome a strong recommendation engine that you need a large catalog and billions of data points to hone.
And everything that you've just said, take out the word your content and put in the word advertising, and it's the same issue.
Right.
The era of we have 3 networks, you can get all of America and just buy 3 spots at 8 o'clock, died a long time ago. But the business model and the way Nielsen measures is still that antiquated system. Nielsen doesn't know that my phone's been on 3 car lots this weekend. I'm therefore in the market immediately to buy a car. They know which brands I'm looking at by which car lots. So all those analytics are what are now being demanded by brands and being demanded by agencies, and yet anything that gets less than a 1 share, there's no analytics on, they're just guessing. So $100 billion worth of ad dollars today are going out just because. That's changing. Over the next 5 years, that won't be. The era of that's over. The kids that came out of college 15, 20 years ago and had to go on the digital desk because no one cared about them are now taking over and expecting the same analytics and research that they were forced to put up with for their $25,000 ad buy now that they're taking over television. So that's where Android TV and Apple TV are spending a lot of their time. I don't know as much of the inside workings of Microsoft, but whoever can solve that more efficiently. The only place that we're still making money the old way is scarcity doesn't exist in choose your own adventure. When you're going down that rabbit hole of whatever you're watching, you're the only person watching that particular path, and there are billions and billions of unsold eyeballs every day will never be monetized. In sports, live, when there's only that 2 minute and they can only get 3 spots in there, that's when rates go up. So it's not just having great analytics nowadays. You can know that that person's about to sneeze and show them the allergy commercial. But there's so many opportunities that the rates have continued to decrease over time.
So Jay, take us through the mindset and the decision process in the mind of an advertiser. Give them some insight from your perspective.
You want to start at the brand or the agency?
Start with the brand.
So at the brand, you guys get really lucky. So complete honesty. At one of my jobs, I spend $2 billion a year on ads. You're CMO of a giant company, your life expectancy is less than 3 years. So it's how do I keep my job for 3 years? You're never going to admit to wanting to spend less and be more efficient, so you're going to spend that, and you've got to figure out something wow. So most of your ad dollars are not spent with any change or thought process whatsoever. When you get to the agency side, they're completely squeezed because their profit centers of creating content have disappeared, and they're expected to do more of a Google-like experience. Argue and cut me off when you experience anything different than this. So what it really comes down to, and the idea that agencies are actually inviting some website or some new app to come in and go on, tell us about your audience. You have to be of such a scale, and by scale we're talking 50 million uniques a week or greater for anybody to do a face-to-face meeting, and even if they're spending 50,000 with you. And then can you come up with a unique result that you can then scale? And that's what everybody's looking for, and that's where most of the metrics today in advertising fall off, is they don't scale because the data hasn't been there, and the time to crunch the data isn't in real time, and the audience behaviors are changing so rapidly that I go back to my, AI has to solve this, or and when it does, then the house of cards changes, because the amount of capital of cord shaving and the efficiency that has to come in ad dollars will mean a lot less capital will go into production, and we're in the golden age of production. You will never see so many quality product over the past 3 years. You will never see that happen again.
Peak TV, has that happened?
Yes, absolutely.
So it's all downhill. I won't need a recommendation engine because there isn't as much stuff to watch anymore. Right now I need an engine because I only have 365 evenings. That means I can binge 365 shows.
But didn't you?
And there's 400 or
But
500
you're
good
carrying
shows
the
on right now.
But the past is following you. Like
But didn't you prioritize? I just finally got around, because I'm never any one place long enough, to Breaking Bad.
Right. Right.
And I'm thoroughly, I started about a couple weeks ago. I'm thoroughly enjoying that I can binge to my till I get blurry-eyed and know that I can pick it up. Or Game of Thrones, you wait till you're so far into the season because I can't keep track of all the characters to do it all. So I think we've changed our expectation of, oh my God, I got to choose between, Lucy and the Brady Bunch.
But I also keep hearing people talk, I've heard multiple times now, people who talk about the new Netflix show coming out, and they're a little less urgent to get on top of watching it because they know it's going to be
Right.
around.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so we've done away with artificial scarcity, and suddenly that means maybe we're not watching this stuff anymore.
And when there's no scarcity, it kills ad revenue.
Right.
Okay? Which is why sports continues to make more and more money.
All right, we've talked a little bit about freemium. We've talked a little bit about advertising. Let's get into subscription model a little bit. JC, you want to give us a little perspective on that model?
Well, I mean, both in traditional dish and also in Sling TV, we're still embracing a subscription model, and so the notion is anytime you've got a subscription, even if you're Netflix and you're charging whatever it is, $10 a month, keeping somebody month to month requires constantly making them pleased with the value that they're getting. So it's the impetus on us is to continue to make the experience such that to use that agency phrase, surprised and delighted. And more than that, that you try to figure out what it is that bugs people, like UI. So we rolled out a new UI that we're revamping, or something like predicting what your bill is going to be. So we've been working really hard to make it so that we promise your bill will be the same. And
But something you're doing really well, that again, is this a problem? Now that you're delivering multi-screen to people and they're watching it on their phone or tablet, you have to
Absolutely.
remind them that you're the source of the content.
Right.
So you have to brand the experience, which you didn't have to do before.
And we do. For instance, the Dish Anywhere application, which you can get on your iPod or your iPad, et cetera, is fantastic because you can actually watch anything on your hard drive at home, and you can watch anything on your Hopper set-top box. You can watch all of Prime Time that you recorded last night, and I'm just streaming it straight, via Sling, straight to my device. Not to mention, of course, all the VOD and what have you. We're very happy about that, and yes, we branded it. Yeah.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Time is flying by. Let's jump into infrastructure a little bit. I saw a stat that just jumped out at me. Like in Germany, like 4 years ago, 25% of the consumers were actually accessing the internet through a dial-up. Try accessing content that way. Good luck. That has now changed. They've now joined the rest of the world, and you've seen the adoption and the proliferation and the adoption fly along with it. So from an infrastructure perspective, Tom, what's next? What changes need to happen to drive consumption or adoption further?
So in this whole discussion between linear broadcast TV and OTT, there's a huge disconnect between the amount of viewers that an OTT program provider can service. I think Major League Baseball Advanced Media, a big EMC, a very successful EMC customer, the most they've ever done is 2 million streams. And that's 2 entirely separate full-time CDNs just chugging along for all they're worth. 2 million streams is nothing when you look at the high watermark for broadcast TV, which is the Super Bowl. 100 million viewers, right? Mm-hmm. And the whole economics, people know this already, but I'll just state it. The whole economics of streaming is completely upside down. In broadcast, of course, once you have a hit, it doesn't cost you anything more. You're already pumping out that signal, whether digitally or RF. But to actually have to pay the CDN for every single stream that somebody accepts to watch your program, the economics are just completely inverted. So one thing is the nature of CDNs is evolving. Netflix, for instance, now places a lot of their content right in the ISP, right in the cross points of major CDNs worldwide. And it's like having little cache appliances all over the place. So that's from a technical point of view, that's kind of the normal thing to do. But to get from 2 million streams domestically to, say, 100 million streams for the Super Bowl, not that OTT would ever be that kind of people would always turn, I think, to broadcast TV for a sports, a live, a shared type of experience. But the difference between 2 million at the max that we can do today, there is a technology. Where's my geek friend in the back that's the free over-the-air antenna guy?
Yeah.
Are you aware of ATSC3, the new digital television standard that's coming out?
I've heard of it, yeah.
The problem is it's going to take 10 years to roll it out in the States. I'm afraid so. It's a great potential, but they've already rolled it out in places like Australia and Korea, and I mean, there's differences in those countries why it makes sense to roll it out there, and it's done well. But here, everybody gets their linear TV and their streaming services and everything from their ISP, which is largely the cable company these days.
And our bandwidth speeds are the slowest of the Western world.
Absolutely, absolutely. Until we get to 25 megabits regularly to the home.
LTE advanced.
So yes, mobile may in fact leapfrog ATSC3 before it's even born, but in the meantime, most people are pretty used to that wire coming into their house, and so a lot of what we refer to as television, it's funny, I don't even think we can call it television anymore. I think all of you guys, I'm just an infrastructure guy, all you guys are not in the TV business anymore, you're in the entertainment services delivery business.
So to translate excellent geek speak, you have a straw in your house right now and the rest of the world has a fire hose, and consumption patterns change when you're not sucking through a straw.
Yeah, they do.
And monetization patterns change. Subscription becomes much more valuable
Yeah.
because you're able to consume more and more people in the home are able to consume
It's the all-you-can-eat
different things.
buffet.
And
There's a really good example of that with Netflix.
They're clamoring to
actually.
get in and
They want to hear
It's-
this.
that's our buyer.
The future.
But I think mobile wins because all the money for automotive needs mobile to solve this.
What I was thinking about, you said, that's how much you can gather changes your consumption habits, right? Not just in how much, but the variety. Like Netflix, when it started out, was in the business of, some of you may be too young to remember, possibly. They were in the business of sending you DVDs, and you would send it back and you'd get another one. And so you cultivated your queue because you darn well wanted to make sure that you got the right DVD coming up. And this was a game that we played. But then when they flipped on streaming and then they made it vast, that changed everything because now I could snack on, like, let's watch a couple episodes of Magnum PI and let's watch a Sundance movie and let's watch 20 minutes of Captain America. And it completely changed the way that we were consuming that content. Yeah.
One more, just before I open it up, because we've got 25 minutes still. So, marketing. We talked about making the audience aware of what's out there. And if you're an OTT channel, you're another type of provider, how do you build awareness and induce trial? What's working?
So I think one of the biggest opportunities that we've seen, and it's also going to be one of the biggest challenges as more services come out. But for right now, social advertising is the best way for us. We found the most cost-effective to, given that niche OTT channels are targeting a specific interest, what better way to target a user than through social advertising where they've implied those interests or liked things that may be on your channel or things like that. So that kind of targeting has been the most cost effective. I think the other place, Roku, for example, everyone, a lot of people don't realize it, but Roku has become one of the fastest growing ad platforms out there right now, predominantly because advertising to somebody on the Roku while they're using the Roku probably is going to lead to far more engagement and downloads and subscriptions than off platform, right? So I think
see like the same 3 ads over and over and over again. On Roku.
that was the Hulu experience.
Are you talking about the video ads, for example?
Yeah, so I'm on Roku, I'm watching a show, and they show me again and again the
They
same.
need a better
Red
programmatic
Lobster.
buy. They
Yeah.
need a better programmatic platform.
That typically stems from whatever, generally speaking, is that something you recently
Oh yeah, no,
experienced? Okay.
yeah.
A lot of channels don't have the volume to attract enough variety of advertisers so they, in essence, when someone buys if an advertiser bought something on that channel, you're going to end up, in order for them
Run
to
the table.
fill that inventory, they're going to have to keep running. The frequency is through the roof. We try to avoid doing that by, we use a DSP that brings in 50 different ad networks. So users at least, they get the pleasure of a variety of advertisements as opposed to the same ad over and over. Still a terrible experience in our opinion. We prefer the subscription model to the ad model. It's a better user experience. But social advertising, definitely on-platform advertising on Roku has proven very effective. We've tried a lot of the other traditional internet-based buys. Most of the time, the conversion rates are too low, and the SAC ends up being too high for us to continue warranting it. So,
Why don't we open it up to a few questions right there? First.
I haven't heard anyone talk about Google Fiber. In a neighborhood that's going to be the first to receive it.
Ooh, I'm
And
jealous.
There's a lot of talk in our neighborhood about, at the very least, skinning up their packages or breaking up that bundle. And you talk about metadata. I can't imagine anyone being any better at it than them. So I'd love to hear some perspective on it.
Well, I think we mentioned it already. When you have unlimited bandwidth, essentially unlimited bandwidth, and a huge swath of content to draw from, not only do your consumption patterns change, but your expectations of what you can get. We're already kind of in the on-demand world, like that's completely the norm now. And I don't know what the next stage is, but I'm super jealous that you're going to find out.
Well, I'll tell you, for all the panels that everybody talks about VR, when you talk about from an infrastructure standpoint of the amount of data that you need and the amount of processing that you need, today's broadband really won't give people that, feature film length VR experience. So, yeah, party at your house.
So, hearing you guys discuss AI, thinking about addressable content, how close are we to a true lean-back addressable experience, where the user doesn't even have to think about what content they want to watch next?
There's a whole bunch of funded startups exactly answering that question. I think big media and established players will start buying and messing them up or improving them or whatever, but that seems to be where there's a lot of capital going.
It's very interesting that Roku bought TiVo, and now they're the biggest patent holder in that space.
Rovio.
Rovi.
Rovi.
Well, they have more lawyers than engineers, so that tends to be their thinking.
I think there's one caveat to, a good example is, when you're logged into Google based off of prior search history and things, literally the searches that you make change based off of you. While there's a positive side to that, the negative side is it ends up a highly AI-driven preference system will end up leading to a self-fulfilling result of only delivering things that you're going to like or it thinks you're going to like. But what it ends up doing is, there is a notion that these kinds of systems can limit choice and limit your perception or awareness that you have multitude of choices that aren't being presented to you. So I think there's...
But if you bring in social in your social graph, they're doing pretty good at solving that as far as the narrow casting that you never get to discover new stuff. To the person that has the Google Fiber, if you have Nest in your home, they also know how many visitors you have to your home per week. So, here's 9 people in this room, here's 12 people. This is a party house. Now we can give different content. It's party night. I mean, so the number of factors that are now coming in, and if you now have an Android system in your autonomous vehicle, I have no privacy and look forward to a world where I'm entertained more succinctly without any effort to discover.
It's so funny to think, though, that if you're reaching a point where it's a lean back experience, just show me my evening, from 6 to 10. Tell me what I do after dinner until I go to bed.
Didn't you grow up with that?
You're describing prime time. I mean, that's what.
But
used
my
to be-
prime time won't be your prime time.
Exactly. We go back to the 11 channels. I mean, yeah, I've heard that everybody watches 11 channels, but the hilarious thing is it's a different 11 channels.
To you youngsters out there, we used to sit there and say, we're too lazy to get up and change the channel before remote controls, and we'll sit through that half an hour bowling for dollars.
We were leaning back.
There was a TV show where you watch people bowl until the show you wanted to watch came on. So, yeah, it's gotten better.
Next question.
We've answered all knowledge.
Go ahead.
Second question is regarding subscriptions, and I heard talk about user experience a lot. So
Yeah.
when it comes to user experience, especially for MVPDs, the question is, what are you guys doing to adapt outside of that? Because I cut the cord specifically because I don't want to pay the massive amount of money required to have, be subscribed to an MVPD. I can still get that content outside of the MVPD. I might have to wait for the window to end, but I can still get that content.
Right.
What's
Well-
going on outside of that?
So we've been thinking about this in a lot of ways. At Dish, for instance, we knew that there were some people who did not want to pay the price for the entire package and day and date getting, they'd rather wait until next year to watch a new network program or whatever. And which is why Sling TV came into being, for instance, which are skinny bundles, which is aimed at raising and lowering your package depending, and adding on a la carte packages as you go. And that won't be the end of the thinking. I mean, this is something that we're thinking about a lot.
I answered it another way. When you look at the mergers between what were traditionally telcos and content companies, where the cable company was innovative, will give you, a phone line and internet and your TV package at one bundle price. Now you're looking differently, that you won't know what you're paying for, just as you don't pay for your handset today when you get a subscription for your mobile plan and they amortize that in. So I think they're going to find different ways to try to satisfy the big media owners and make it feel like you're not paying that for content.
I would add, when it comes to UI, UX, so for us, when we're running an OTT service, the single biggest thing that kills us is churn, right? And what we've found is user engagement is directly correlative to churn. So if users are highly engaged, if their average minutes viewed per session increases, if the aggregate base of all those users, the minutes viewed, are increasing, our churn stays low. So one of the things that we do on it from a UI, UX perspective is basically you engineer and design the UI, UX and iterate it to increase engagement, to have the user keep coming back, through whether it's notifications, other things. And I think one of the biggest challenges we have is on platforms where we don't have the flexibility to iterate the UI based off of the data coming in off of customers. Is it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. That platform, I can't rapidly iterate it, therefore I'm going to focus on the ones where I can rapidly iterate it and change it. Therefore, engagement and churn is decreased on there. Therefore, I no longer support that platform. And I think what you're going to actually see happen is platforms that have a highly flexible, mutable, and fluid ability to change the UI and iterate it based off of the small incremental changes that need to happen to hold on and keep users engaged are going to be the ones that flourish. And platforms where you're locked into a templamatic UI that can't change, those will fall by the wayside. So for us, UI, UX is sort of the tip of the spear for mitigating churn and keeping our users.
Here's how important UI is. Finding a life partner has been reduced to this. Do you really think people are going to spend more effort to pick what they're watching tonight?
Question for each of you. What is the sort of the most interesting that you're looking for in terms of like an indicator? Because there's this, what I'm hearing is the assumption that things are not just going to continue as they are, right? That it's not that, you know, Netflix has this audience share, TV has this audience share. Everyone is saying that's definitely going to change. Well, what's going to what's tipping your hand? Like, how do you know?
In the next 12 months.
Yes.
So for me, it's what we've referred to here as AI in my world gets referred to as machine learning or ML. Seeing that get more deeply applied to all the content that is getting aggregated is going to be huge, and it's already starting. There's already tests with it that are going, and the thing about machine learning is the more it gets used, the better it is, and so very quickly we're going to see it snap to a place where we won't understand how we dealt with this stuff before that. The time when we had multiple interns assigning metadata to things, we'll think, what a ridiculous thing that was when we didn't have computers do this. That to me is like the biggest thing in the next 12 months.
You want to go? Anybody else?
Oh, I've got.
I would say for us, just from our world, you know, if you go to a Roku or Apple TV, Roku has now 2,500 channels, but when you sort of read between the lines and you take out, okay, every mega church in America has an app that counts for 1,200 of those channels. Take out the photo apps, the screensaver apps and all that. There's probably only on Roku maybe 200 viable OTT services, and then take away all the ones chock full of PD, crappy movies, and things like that, and you maybe have 50 OTT services, right? Take away all the authenticated cable channels and everything, and then you've got maybe 30 direct consumer OTT services actively competing. That's not very many when you consider all the various interest groups, demos, things that are not being addressed, and when we live in an environment where there's 1,000+ cable channels to choose from. So, however, over the next, what you've probably seen the drumbeat every day of a new service, Filmstruck, Comic-Con HQ coming from Lionsgate, the Kevin James Comedy Channel. What we're seeing is probably an explosion of hundreds of OTT services all chasing and competing for eyeballs entering the market over the next 12 months. What concerns me, of course, is all of these companies, a lot of them major media companies, are going to be spending tens of millions of dollars for each of these channel launches, maybe chasing some of the same eyeballs I am. And two is, throwing 200, 300 more choices in the next 12 months. How does that? We're already at peak subscription fatigue right now. I'm even being in the industry, I subscribe to a lot of stuff. But people who aren't in the industry, they start to really, we forget that the median household income in America is like $60K, right? Subscribing on top of a cable package to 3, 4, 5 OTT services, people are they really have to see value and utility out of it, or they're going to cancel it. And I think what you're going to see is in this niche OTT service play, you're going to see channels that are going to be trying to survive on 10 to 15% churn rates, which basically says you have to replace your entire audience every year. Yeah. How do you do that in a niche vertical? So those are the kinds of challenges that I'm hoping we have a good business model to address, but it's going to be a bloodbath out there for OTT, in my opinion, for the companies that can't figure it out.
So I'll give you a big, bold, ballsy prediction. So next year you can tell me I was wrong. So if we know that sports, because it's live and scarcity, is the best monetized content out there, you're going to see an inversion of a new category will suddenly make money where everybody's written it off. And that is breaking news and actually journalism and news gathering sources suddenly becoming a new, very profitable OTT space. And you're going to see this driven by print publications, not by talking heads, which budgets no longer collect news, they just talk about news. So I think you're going to see some really big media plays spending hundreds of millions of dollars on the space because there's money to be made.
I think we got 3 minutes left. I'm going to ask one final question, then we'll be off there. Then you can swarm them all you want.
Can I throw out one more that I think is going to be really important?
Yes.
I really, because of the importance of things like Serial and so forth, I think podcasting, somehow audio, the growth of audio is super important, and we did nothing with that. The TV people have not yet figured out how to bring in this vast audience that's so audio
Good point.
is also something to watch.
So if you have $1 that
Yeah.
you're going to invest over the next year, what are you going to invest it in? Where are you putting your money?
Li-Fi. It replaces Wi-Fi with lights 100 times faster.
Okay?
For my own personal vertical, investing in more content. Content arms race.
As a consumer, I'm not in the entertainment services business like these guys. I'm an infrastructure guy. So as a consumer, I will pay more for programs that are shot and finished in high dynamic range with immersive audio than I will for anything else, including sports.
Good point. Discoverability, absolutely. Yeah, figuring out some way to solve getting people, everything we've been complaining about.
For me, I think it would have to be that infrastructure. If I can put my dollar towards getting that faster broadband, so I stop having to have these negotiations around which content I'm going to watch or being able to struggle with it, I'm happy.
All right, I want to thank our panel. It's been extraordinary. It's been brought back and forth. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.